Tamara Leach and Chris Barber were sentenced today by Justice Heather Perkins McVeigh. They were facing charges for their roles in the 2022 Freedom Convoy held in Ottawa. To talk about this and more is our political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist, Brian Lilley. Brian, what do you think of this sentence?
It's more than I would have given them, absolutely. It's less than other judges would have, and I'll let people argue it out in the comments. 18 months conditional sentence for both of them. There's some house arrest elements, some curfews in there. Look, let's remember that both Tamara Lich and Chris Barber were charged and convicted with mischief. 18 months is still too harsh of a sentence when you look at what people get for serious crimes in this country. Far too harsh. Should they have received something? Well, based on precedent, yes, something, but not 18 months. And I know their supporters will say they shouldn't have received anything. This was great. This was wonderful. Well, they did break the law, and we can't argue that fact. It's just how does the law respond to that? The Crown, in this case, wanted a 7-year sentence. The Crown asked for a 7-year sentence on this. That is beyond ridiculous. I would have said that the pain and the suffering that they have both gone through over this, and Justice Perkins McVeigh made these points as she went through her decisions. She delivered the verdict orally and read out her reasonings for this from the bench orally. Uh, she was pointing out that, look, Tamara Lich lost her employment as a result of this. They have both faced an awful lot of obstacles to living a normal life as a result of this. I forget Chris Barber's time in jail ahead of this, but Tamara Lich was 49 days in jail. So you could have made an argument for, well, they've suffered enough and just gone on from there, or maybe a 6-month conditional sentence with lighter conditions. The judge went for 18 months. That is far better than they may have expected based on what the Crown prosecutors were asking for, but the Crown prosecutors were way out of line on this. 7 years. There are people convicted of murder that we don't sentence to 7 years in jail.
Right.
So look, there were a lot of mitigating factors. Justice Perkins McVeigh pointed those out. I still think she went a little bit harder than she had to. She could have gone, as I said, 6 months conditional sentence and in lighter conditions. Overall, I would expect. I haven't spoken to Tamara Lich's lawyer yet. I was texting with him before the verdict was released. I think that overall they're going to be somewhat happy, if not completely happy, as a result of this.
So do you think this was like a political prosecution?
Absolutely. The lead Crown prosecutor in Ottawa is a man named Dallas Mack, and the fact that he would push for a 7-year sentence. Now, he was not the argument would be Dallas Mack was not the prosecutor on this case, and so he wasn't involved in this. It was other prosecutors that asked for that. No, he is the lead in the office, and he pushed for that. Now, I know some people are saying these are Doug Ford's prosecutors. This is Doug Ford trying to prosecute this. I've spoken to people in the Attorney General's office here in Ontario. They are limited in what they can do and say. They are basically allowed to ask questions about what the Crown prosecutors are doing, but they cannot direct them. They are forbidden from directing them. That is supposed to be completely arm's length standalone. Dallas Mack is a very political person. I've spoken to people who have been to speeches he's given, both public ones and ones to judges and justices of the peace. And he is very political, very much on the progressive side, very much against what the Freedom Convoy was even trying to
Wow.
accomplish. And you can say, and I'm of this view. I'm of the view that the Freedom Convoy went to Ottawa with the best of intentions. But I'm also a
Right.
law and order person. And so I don't believe that you can set up camp on a public road, especially in an area like right in front of Parliament Hill, and camp there for 3 weeks and just say, well, I can stay here as long as I want. That is not the way the law operates in Canada. So I'm kind of in the middle between the two extreme camps saying they never did anything wrong, and the other side that says these are domestic terrorists, lock them up for life. But Dallas Mack was very much opposed to them politically, and it shows in how the prosecution went, including in the request for sentencing. And so, very disappointed in this, in terms of how it's been handled. But even when you have a conservative government, you always have to remember that the bureaucracy, the permanent government, is not going to be on their side.
And while we're on the topic of the 2022 Freedom Convoy, there's another freedom movement going on right now, and it involves protests behind the potential culling of some 400 ostriches at a BC farm. Do you see parallels between these two movements?
To a degree, look, the ostriches were never meant for human consumption. So that's a good thing. There was avian flu detected, but they were never meant for human consumption. Is there a way to handle this better than just saying you've got to kill all the ostriches? Absolutely. Just as there is with the outbreak of avian flu, which is a very serious disease. I mean, we can't discount that. Uh, but I remember being in the United States a couple of years ago, and the price of eggs went up to $8, $9 a dozen. Why? Because they'd culled so much of the flock due to avian flu concerns, and so all of a sudden, regular people are suffering because they're trying to stop the outbreak. Um, so you've got to find a line between stopping the outbreak of a very serious disease within the flock and making sure that people can live, or in this case, the ostriches can live. Pierre Polyev was asked about this several times, and he just kept putting it down to incompetence by the Carney Liberal government via the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which is not handling this thing well at all. And I would tend to agree with them. This is incompetence. Could this have been handled in another way? Absolutely. But now both sides appear to be dug in. I don't know what's going to happen. At the same time, here in Ontario, we've got 30 beluga whales trapped at a place called Marineland, which you may have seen the ads over the years because they try to draw tourists from across the country to this um, marine facility in the Niagara region. Everyone loves Marineland. Well, not anymore because they got 30. The place is shut down because the owners died, and you got 30 beluga whales trapped, and the federal government saying, no, we won't let you export them. You've just got to keep them alive. Well, nobody can do that when the theme park is shut down. The whales aren't living in good conditions. So, it's another example of the federal government acting incompetently when it comes to the lives of animals. And they're trying to claim that they have the high road here.
Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Washington, D.C. to meet with U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, Brian, Trump clearly believes that tariffs are good for him and his country, and he just announced new tariffs on medium and heavy-duty trucks. Will this impact Canada?
To a degree, yes. So the medium and heavy duty trucks, those we're not talking semi trucks, we're talking medium and heavy duty pickup trucks, and some of those were made in Oshawa, Ontario, and some of that production has recently been moved to Indiana.
Mm.
So production is moving from Canada to the United States as a result of the fear of this. About $15 billion a year of medium and heavy duty trucks are imported to the United States from Mexico, about $4.5 billion a year from Canada. Now, a lot of this, even with the 25% tariff, which Trump says will come into effect November 1st, will happen. Uh, that's when it'll come into effect. But most of this will still be CUSMA compliant or USMCA compliant. And so the tariffs will not apply or will not apply in full. It will be rather dodgy. But what is the impact of this? The impact of all of these tariff threats is uncertainty. And as I was saying to Jeanette last week, Trump's talking about a 100% tariff on uh, films and TV productions made out of the outside of the United States. Well, what does that mean? Well, suddenly you're sitting in Hollywood and you're looking at green lighting a movie and you're like, oh, I was thinking of putting that in Vancouver, or I'm thinking of putting that in Alberta, like, The Last of Us, or in Toronto. Then oh, it's 100% tariff. Oh, maybe we should shoot in North Carolina or Georgia or Chicago or Los Angeles. It's the same thing with vehicle production or any production. We face uncertainty. If we move to the States, we don't have that uncertainty. And so Trump is talking about that. Now, while he's sitting with Mark Carney in the Oval Office, he hinted that there's going to be movement on some tariffs. The leaking out of the Prime Minister's office is that there'll be movement on steel tariffs. We'll have to wait and see what the full details of that are. But Donald Trump did say Canadians will love us again. So obviously something is going to give. But speaking with one business leader, he told me, no, we're not going to see a full deal on anything until at least the end of the year. Maybe a little bit of movement on the margins related to steel tariffs, but nothing big coming our way until at least the new year.
So can you zero in on this impact to Alberta? Because, I mean, you can't drive down an Alberta road and even blink an eye without seeing like a truck on the road. But also with our film industry, like you mentioned The Last of Us, that was filmed in Calgary. There were parts filmed here in Lethbridge. The Ghostbusters movie, parts of that were filmed in Fort Macleod. Let's talk about the impact here in Alberta.
So, regardless of which part of the country you're in, Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, it's about uncertainty. And so these business leaders have to make decisions about where to invest their money. Look at Greg Abel last week from Enbridge, the CEO from Enbridge, or Francois Poirier from TC Energy. They were, going out and talking about the billions that they're investing in the United States. And why are they investing billions there and not in Canada? Well, the regulatory environment's not good. So that's specific to the oil and gas industry. The regulatory environment's not good. And it is better in the United States. So they decided to move investment there. Now, the Carney government is trying to hint that things will be better. Well, but they don't actually have that in writing. They don't have any assurances on film, on trucks, on agriculture, on anything else. You're just sitting there on pins and needles and saying, I don't know. I was talking to one filmmaker earlier today who was telling me that they had to change their plans. So this is a joint Canada-US production. It's been shot around the world. It's a documentary, but they were looking at doing some of the production because most of the people involved in it are from Toronto. They were going to do some of the editing here. They've just had to adjust and say, okay, the editing's going to be done in Los Angeles, just so that they have that certainty that they're not going to be tariffed, that it's not going to be more difficult for them to get showing. So if you've got a production company in Alberta and you are hoping that there's a certain TV show or a movie that's going to come to your area, well, now you're up in the air. Nav, I live in an area in downtown Toronto where I'm constantly running into movie productions. And you turn down a side street and suddenly there's a row of those trailers for the actors to be in and for the craft services and for the bathrooms. And then they're off in a building somewhere on the University of Toronto, shooting a school scene somewhere. That's a regular occurrence for me. It's going to be less of a regular occurrence for me because of this threat of tariffs. He doesn't even have to put them into play. The threat will change things.
So lastly, Brian, like if Prime Minister Mark Carney doesn't get a deal done or get some movement in this trade war, how will this affect him politically? Like could he even see a second term?
That is really up in the air. He ran and won on being the guy that could deliver with Donald Trump. So, look, as Canadians, we have to hope that our prime minister, whoever it is, wins, because if the prime minister doesn't win, then we as a country lose. So even if you didn't vote for him, you want the country to do well. So you want to kind of hope for him to do well. Looks like he's coming out of Washington with something. We'll wait and see what the details are. Is it enough? He said that he knew Donald Trump, he understood Donald Trump, he could negotiate with Donald Trump. Also remember that he said President Trump wants to break us so that America can own us. And he said that back in March and April when tariffs were lower and on fewer goods. And now he's trying to tell us we've got the best trade deal in the world. So, Canadians are starting to sit and look and say, all right, you promised us something you're not delivering. If he doesn't deliver in a substantial way, not a small way, and I feel like what he's coming out of Washington with is still a little bit small, but if he doesn't come up with something big by the end of this year, I think politically he could be in trouble. You're already seeing polling showing the Conservatives pulling ahead of the Liberals. You're seeing polling showing that issues such as the cost of living, housing affordability, crime, immigration, all issues that the Conservatives lead on, becoming more important than Donald Trump. So if he doesn't get a big win soon, yes, I think that he could be in trouble politically.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.